Hi, I'm Stacy from ConstructConnect. I am joined by Don Wainryk. He is a partner at Ennead Architects. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's roundtable talked a lot about urban development and how the rapid growth challenges that are required to meet the population growth across the globe. And I wanted to know, from your perspective, how architects today are rising to this challenge.
Well, I think what we learned this morning, and it was a great panel because of the diversity of architects and their experience, that architects are dealing with densification and urbanization all over the world and in many, many different contexts. So we heard from an expert, very talented Chinese architect who's busily going about preserving Chinese culture within a very rapidly developing context where a lot of cultural relics have been lost because of rapid urbanization. So that's very important work to preserve memory for the sake of posterity and future generations. And we also heard from a colleague who's working in the developing world in Africa, providing vital structures, infrastructure, if you will, the infrastructure of healthcare to populations that really have never had it before. So that's a tremendous commitment that they're making. And then at the other end of the spectrum, in the North American context, we had a colleague talking about a very sophisticated project that's rebuilding a portion of New York City's very complex architecture and urban environment.
What would you say for you is an example that emulates this, whether it be in Canada or abroad, a project that has really met that need?
Let me think for a minute, because I thought of a couple of examples. And I guess since the theme this morning was a lot about urbanism and densification as opposed to specific building projects, some of the things that I think we need to advocate for and make sure get the best quality design are actually urban infrastructure projects. Infrastructure paves the way for future development. It requires a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of political will to complete. And there are regions of the world that are doing the hard work of investing in infrastructure, and infrastructure can last upwards of 100 years. So if you look at an example like the underground mass transit system in Shanghai, which is a fantastic recent creation that's really allowed the building to explode with development and still not become completely overrun with cars. And if you look in a city like Toronto, it's clear that there's a growing vehicle problem. Others, you're not alone. This is true in New York, it's true in Seoul, Korea. But countries that are investing in mass transit and in high-speed internet service and things like that are really developing an infrastructure of connectivity that will, I think, ultimately diffuse some of the concentration that we now have to have these perhaps overly dense urban centers. And you can imagine some cities actually having multiple centers, each with their own identity. And that diversity is a very positive thing. People seek out diversity in their cities.
So when we talk about the issues surrounding densification and requirements surrounding the need to be green and smart technologies, it feels almost like today's architect almost comes with a demand for social responsibility. Do you feel that pressure, and what's your response to that?
Yeah, well, we certainly feel the pressure for it. Pressure has a slightly negative connotation. I think it's a wonderful responsibility for us to shoulder. It's one that my practice fully embraces in all of our work, whether it's we're doing a hospital or a university building or a commercial mixed-use building, or some of our humanitarian work that we're doing with the United Nations. Architecture has always had a public side, even when it trends more toward the private realm, but buildings typically exist in public space, and whether a person ever enters them or not, buildings affect people within them and without them. So we have to be acutely aware of our responsibility to improve people's lives through our work. And there are many ways for us to do it. And what's particularly interesting about this moment in architecture is we are collaborating more and more with allied disciplines, ones that might in fact not be considered traditional collaborators. We all know that we work very closely with engineers and so forth, but we're now starting to work with anthropologists and social psychologists and people who can help us understand how we can help populations stay happy, healthy, and productive so that people have fulfilling lives. So we can play a role in that.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your intellect with us today. Really appreciate it. And be sure to check out this video and more online.